Movement podcast. I am one of your hosts, Allison Sinikowski, with my brother Matt Sinikowski. I am the PT, doctor of PT. Matt is just a guy.
Correct. That is accurate. Hello, doctor.
Yeah. Just kidding. He's a great guy, but he's got, he's a guy, an enthusiastic guy in many aspects of his life. How's that?
I hold no authority here.
There you go. Fair enough.
Yeah.
So today we would like to welcome Dr. Theresa DeLorenzo, and she is a registered dietitian. We're going to go through kind of these terms because they can get a little cloudy when we talk into the nutrition world. But Theresa and I met pretty much through social media / we live in the same area. I have heard her name a few times, being in kind of the sports performance world. If we were talking nutrition with somebody, her name might come up. And then through social media is really where I found you out. And I saw your office when you were located in a cryotherapy center.
Nice.
So it had an office there. So I knew your name, and then just kind of was doing some research because the topic of nutrition is something that we talk about a lot here, but that I'll talk a lot in PT world with clients. And, when I'm talking about it, it's the basics, like asking what's your diet like, and asking, do you drink enough water? And then beyond that, if somebody has a thought or says something that isn't lining up necessarily musculoskeletally, and I'm digging and it just doesn't sit right with me, I need a network. And that's where I reached out to Theresa, and she was gracious enough to have some coffee with me and come and talk to our physical therapy team as well. And then generous enough to spend her time with us today. Because when we met, there was so many things that were shocking to me that are kind of like streamlined right now within the nutrition world. And then when you were talking, it's like, I love it. 'Cause it's how I talk about movement, and you're like, yeah, I don't know about that. Yeah, I definitely want to do that. And it's like things that everybody's talking about. And, you're sitting here with your PhD or in nutrition or as a dietitian. And I'm like, yeah, this is what we're supposed to be focusing on, not all this other stuff. So Theresa, welcome. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
We would love to give us your background from your point of view. I would love to hear that, and our listeners to know who you are.
Sure. I am, like Allison said, I'm a dietitian. I work as a program director for 2 master's degrees out in Missouri, obviously remotely. So here in New York, upstate New York, I own a private practice called Nutrition for Optimal Performance. I work with all kinds of athletes, runners, gymnasts, wrestlers. I work with the powerlifting, Paralympic team. So lots of different types of people. Because I'm in the running world, I do see probably more runners than other sports. But so I work with them on really optimizing their nutrition so that their performance is what it can be. They can achieve their full potential by optimizing their diet. But also, just ensuring long-term health and avoiding things that might be detrimental and fads that are out there everywhere, and that, just traps that people fall into.
Yep.
And I also work with a lot of people, not necessarily even athletes, but just a lot of people who struggle with body image and, not liking what they see, always comparing themselves to others. And so I do have a program that I work with people on that and just improving that mind-body relationship.
Love it.
So that's my practice. I have a membership. We do, cooking demos, and we have newsletters. And then I work with people one-on-one as well. So.
Awesome. So a lot of the stuff I want to dive in today, I think the uniqueness of the body image program was something that really struck me. And then, I kind of have just a bullet of questions of like, when we talked before, of like challenging the norms of what we should.
Absolutely.
So go ahead, Matt. I don't know if
I was going to say, like, challenging the norms, like, just 30,000 foot view, like when you're looking macro right now, because that's what we always do. Like, the same movements that Allison is preaching are the same movements elite athletes will do versus somebody like just me, who's an enthusiast, to the person just kind of getting going. What are kind of those overarching things that before you start tailoring down, that you often have to just like heavy reset when somebody comes in the door, whether it's an athlete or a common person? Because I'm sure that that's a common thread you see. Be like, okay, we're going to start here. And for the athletes, I know you go way more specific, and I'd love to hear about that. But what's that like, that big sledgehammer or that shake of the shoulders? Like, hey, this is how we're going to completely reframe the way you're thinking about what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's a great question. So what I want people to understand when they work with me is that, you know, say it's, you know, trying to lose weight or trying to change their mindset about their body. Like, it didn't happen overnight. You didn't wake up one day and you're like, oh, you know what? I loved the way my body looked yesterday, and today I hate it. Like, that doesn't happen overnight. So undoing it isn't going to happen overnight either. So, you know, people turn to fads all the time because they want a quick fix. They want to lose weight quickly. You didn't gain 20 pounds in a week.
No.
You shouldn't lose 20 pounds in a week. And what I always try to remind them is if you lose it slow, or if you make changes that you can do forever, like I always say to people, all right, what you're doing now, is this something you could realistically do for the rest of your life? And if the answer is anywhere near no, then it's not going to work.
Yep.
You know, it has to be something that's going to fit in your lifestyle that you can continue forever. Because as soon as you get that feeling of deprivation or overdoing it or any of those extremes, is when you're going to, you know, just go back to the way you were doing things before and end up in the same trouble.
Yeah. It's that slow, methodical, look, right? So you gotta be patient. And so I imagine like that first step, even if it's an athlete who's relatively in shape, what you probably want to do is an entire assessment first before you even start saying something, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I really try to like assess where they are, where their mindset is, what they're taking in, what does their lifestyle look like. I also will do what's called a nutrition-focused physical exam and look at different, you know, their eyes, their hair, their nails, different things to assess if there's any like profound nutrient deficiencies that need to be addressed. So yeah, we spend a lot of time the first visit specifically going over where they are now, kind of how they got there, and, you know, where they want to go and how that's going to be realistically achieved.
The more people we have with this private practice stuff, Allison's now private practice. It's just, you're like the fourth person that's just like, the initial visit needs to be a couple hours long. It can't be, or, you know, it's an extensive visit. Where Allison, coming from PT world, always talks about in the healthcare insurance, it was you're in, you're out, quick assessment, follow-up visit. Her visits now are 90 minutes long, and she doesn't even touch somebody physically. They talk about how'd you get here, or what's your history, like this deep history of assessing. And it feels like that is again, even with somebody who's in great shape, to get to an optimal place, you still have to understand everything. You gotta understand.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And so one of the first things I'll do with people is, say it's someone who's struggling with their body image. You know, how did this start? Why did this start? What in your life like triggers you to feel bad or worse about yourself? Because if they don't know those answers, or if they haven't taken the time to figure that out, it's kind of like putting a Band-Aid on it, right? We're not getting to the root of it. We're just, you know, kind of covering up for what's really the root. And so it's not going to be as impactful or profound if we don't really go to those roots. And it's, you know, it's hard sometimes for them to revisit those memories, but if we don't do that, we're not going to have the progress. We're not going to see the success.
I mean, you know, like we talk a lot from the movement side. I mean, it's the same discussion, right? And it's this foundation of, but the understanding why first,
right,
is not unique to you or me. It's like everything that involves our life. Like if you go astray one way, it's like, why? Like what was the fact
what led you there?
And what led you there? I do think, you know, I was, Matt, your face said it too, but the shock of the physical assessment to identify nutrient deficits. I don't know. I mean, I know that's like, you know, deep, but can you give us a little more insight on that? Because I would say the majority of people I talk to that either have had nutrition counseling or discussions, and Yeah. So I guess I have two questions. One is
Okay.
the physical exam, because I don't think that's being done. And I don't know if you would agree, like nearly enough.
Correct.
And it's like one of those things like primary care wise, should this be a primary care thing in their physical every year where, you know, I say you should look at how somebody's squatting to know, just look at their squat. I know it's a long exam. Look at their squat. And if their squat sucks, they need help with movement, you know, or like you're like, if you look at your nails or your eyes or whatever it is you're looking at. So that's the first question. And I'll say the second out loud is just, what's the difference between everybody in the nutrition world?
Yeah.
Nutritionists, personal trainers who do
Okay. Yeah. So
do this, right? So I don't know which one you want to tackle first.
Well, let's do the qualifications one, like nutritionist versus dietitian versus the PhD. I think that specialization is pretty interesting and might help a lot of people like level set.
Sure.
There's different issues they talk about.
Totally. And, you know, there's so much confusion. And when people call me a nutritionist, I just kind of like cringe, you know, because it kind of.
By the way, I think I did it like when we were like, who are you talking to?
I mean, everyone does it.
Yeah, of course.
People just don't know, right? And so basically what a nutritionist means is absolutely nothing. Like it doesn't mean anything. Like if you guys get off this call after we talk for an hour, you know, you might say, hey, I'm a nutritionist now. Well,
I was going to say,
I might put it on my social profiles. I'm a nutritionist.
Oh shit. All right.
So it just means like someone who has an interest. And some states have a licensure protection where you have to have some sort of credential to be able to call yourself a nutritionist. But nutritionist is, let's say, the lowest level of, you know, nutrition, credentialing, knowledge, etc.
Yeah.
To be a dietitian, a registered dietitian, it's a national recognition where you've gone to 4 years of undergrad, then you apply for an internship, you do the internship, which is at least 1,200 hours, and then you take a national credentialing examination. And then as of 2024, you then also have to, actually before you take the exam as of 2024, you have to also have a master's degree. So I just am, you know, just really into nutrition, obviously. So even back, I'll date myself, but back in 2000 when I finished, I just went right into the master's. And then when that was done, I was like, okay, what's next? So I got my doctorate as well. So
yeah. And then on that though, to I think Alice, like what's the difference between you and everyone else in the nutritional world? Like Allison right now, we talked about a lot, and we had a doctor on metabolic health on a couple of weeks ago. You know, a lot of people are learning to buck the trends that are being taught in school, Allison included, in movement. You know, people that graduate don't keep up with the latest research, and they're stuck in those institutional things they were taught. So is that accreditation, which I think we 100% still need. What is like the process for you to keep up with, oh, you know what, everything I learned about this topic is kind of gone.
So we have to get 75 continuing education units every 5 years. So, and then there's also additional certifications that you get in different, you know, specialty areas, sports nutrition, you know, pediatric nutrition. So, and those would, you know, help to fulfill those 75 continuing education units. But like you said, I mean, nutrition is one of those fields that's ever evolving. So, you know, new research comes out all the time. And one of the issues I find in the nutrition world is the way some of the information is presented, like in media, you know, social media, like it's just so skewed, you know, like my parents will call me, oh my gosh, we just heard that this is bad for us. Okay, there was like 3 patients in this study and it went on for a month. Like, let's simmer down. Okay, you know, like, so just knowing how to interpret what you're reading and hearing.
Right, a study, a scientific method, like what's significant. 100%. That's cool. So, and then I think Al, your next question is, because I'm definitely interested in that, like in your assessment, I'm sure, again, you do, what are you eating? What are your diet habits? How often you're eating? When do you work out around all that stuff? I'm sure you go through all that, but the physical stuff, skin tone, nail health, probably hairs and
absolutely
and split
all
ends.
that stuff tells us so much.
So could you like whatever, just go off on those things that you look at. Cause I think that's what your question now was,
Yeah,
right?
and to your point, Matt, like this, I believe you said was something that has evolved in the dietitian curriculum.
Yeah, sometimes
right?
historically, dietitians went into the field because it meant they could go and work in a hospital and they didn't have to touch people. And well, you do now. Like you really, in order to really effectively do your job, you do. And so one of the things when I was the program director at SUNY Oneonta for that nutrition program, one of the new, this nutrition focused physical exam became this thing that we were asking students to do, but we were sending them into all these facilities where the preceptors or the dietitians who were overseeing them were like, what? So I went, would go around and teach this skill to dietitians who were like, well, I went into this field 20 years ago because I didn't want to do this. But anyhow, so when we look at, when we're assessing someone's intake, their nutritional status, we can ask questions about energy and fatigue levels and different things, but we can also gain a lot of perspective about their nutrient levels based on, like, you pull down and look at the sclera under your eye. If that's really light, that could be indicative of iron deficiency. If we look at nails, if there's lines that are going up and down, that could be indicative of zinc deficiency or calcium deficiency. Hair that falls out really readily, probably B12, maybe biotin, protein, everyone's looking at their nails. So yeah, all of these things tell us, a lot about, and maybe they are eating these nutrients, but they could potentially not be absorbing them. Athletes are at super high risk for iron deficiency. So that's something I'm really tuned into with the athletes. Especially runners with the heel strike. It's an intense, all of the jostling, they lose a lot of iron through their sweat. They lose a lot of iron through their GI tract. So I do a lot of iron assessment with the athletes. And I often will, Allison, you and I talked about this, we'll send, sometimes they'll have like one or two of the indicators from their blood work that their doctor will send, or they'll have, but it really just tells like a smidgen of the story. Iron's so complicated. Like, is it in storage? Did you actually lose it? So I have a whole list of blood work that I'll have them get to kind of back up my findings and things like that.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. And so one question from the system side of that is, how do you feel the older dietitians, like, do you feel the physical exam is being implemented appropriately, or is the profession as a whole behind on implementing it?
Yeah. Do you think you're like at the forefront of that, and you're like, this is where we need to be, Yeah,
I think it is where we need to be. I think there's still a lot of resistance. I think, there's a lot of resistance. I think there's a fear maybe amongst old school dietitians, perhaps, about feeling like they're overstepping boundaries in the medical profession, and maybe feeling like they're redoing something that some of the medical professionals are already doing, but it's different. You're looking at different things, right? And that's not what they're focused on. That's what you're focused on. So there needs to be that level of assessment from the dietitians. And I think too, it's just, they're not comfortable doing it yet because it wasn't something we were trained to do. And I've done a lot of webinars on it recently. I actually did a webinar during the pandemic on, now a lot of private practices maybe were virtual, and dietitians were even working from home that worked in hospitals. Like, okay, now how do we do this? So that was sort of when that questionnaire, Allison, that I gave you sort of started, like, okay, let's look at these things. Explain to me, what these things look like on you, because I can't look at you right now, but I would have, if I was really concerned about certain things, I would have them send pictures and things like that. So the pandemic probably set us back a little bit, but it is something that needs to be pushed because it does tell us so much. That.
Let me ask you this question. So in the musculoskeletal world, the research, there was a pretty powerful research article, and it's old. It is like 10 to 12 years old. So I don't know where it stands now. But that showed for musculoskeletal knowledge, basic musculoskeletal knowledge, that those physicians or those healthcare providers that had the most knowledge went orthos, neuros, PTs with their doctorate in orthopedic specialties. And then you saw this graph kind of trickle down all the way to primary carers who had the least knowledge. And another independent study at the time showed that primary cares, and I'm not knocking primary cares, this is just what they're taught, is that 80% of the time they failed a basic musculoskeletal exam. When given a basic musculoskeletal exam, how do you manage back pain? How do you manage shoulder pain? It was Childs et al. Was one of the studies, but it was, so this was back 10 to 12 years ago, showing that, you know, the knowledge behind the musculoskeletal system in primary care is poor. So if people were using this as their primary way to help musculoskeletal injuries, they clearly are being mismanaged because they don't understand. You know, they don't have time and they don't understand. How is that with nutrition? Yeah, because they'll say, you know, if something's going on, well, how's your diet and how's your exercise? But if somebody doesn't, or you know, eat better and exercise more, and if somebody don't understand what those mean, they can't change it.
Yeah,
you know, and
right.
so we're, you know, that's where like the collaboration between disciplines.
Right. That's when, you know, they need to realize their lack of knowledge perhaps and refer out. You know, years ago, I worked in the NICU as a dietitian. And so we'd send these babies home, and I was the first dietitian to work in the NICU at Albany Med. So all these physicians, the pediatricians were like, okay, you've got them on this concoction. Like, what is it? And how do I monitor them? And so they would call me. And so they knew that it was out of their scope. And then that's when my initial private practice launched, because I'm like, okay, these babies clearly have to be followed up somewhere. So I think it's, you know, basically the message is that just knowing what their limitations are and knowing when to refer to someone who has more specialized knowledge in that area. You know,
where are we with that? Where are we with that as a society? You know, like as getting people referred appropriately from a nutrition side.
Yeah.
And where are we?
I think it depends on the area. Like, I think there's definitely, you know, orthopedists that refer to dietitians, and there's some that don't. I think it's done, but there's certainly improvement that needs to still happen.
Yeah, it's a focus, I think, we keep talking about here, where you know, built on developing yourself is one, driving accountability to people like me to listen more to you and know where to go to research to first say, okay, I got to start rethinking about this, and then who I reach out to. But then, as Allison keeps saying, driving accountability to providers and to the industry to develop, because healthcare is just broken. We've just kind of thrown the towel on it. So
completely thrown the towel.
I really have. But to Allison's point, like building these niche networks where you two are now connecting, it's almost like now it's like you two are almost a nutrition and movement practice together, where you know you can go back and forth and talk, and you're almost like re-centralizing by decentralizing, right? And I think it takes more people just kind of breaking outside, doing these things and getting better results, and then connecting, but taking the responsibility to connect with others where they're not the expert. And I think that's where you see it. Probably you said people are afraid to step into other areas where they're not the expert. Well, exactly. But you two are collaborating, and that's how it starts to work, I think, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think there's a lot, you know, just increasing awareness amongst lots of different like personal trainers and, you know, like we've talked about physicians, just making sure they know that we're here and we can help, you know, where their knowledge gap starts. That's when to kind of make that referral.
Yeah. And it's almost like
I'm just kind of floored. Like, I mean, having Aaron and I were laughing a couple of weeks ago. It's kind of, I've shifted personally to being like the medical provider for our entire family, like whatever comes up. So if somebody has a sinus infection, they're calling me. So I'm like,
like
I can't, like, but at the same time, it's like they're not getting the help they need. So I'm not helping them per se, but I'm helping to advocate for them. Right. So go ahead.
No, it's just, you do have to be your own advocate, you know, because there are just things that are absolutely ridiculous that people will say that they've been told. And it's
like, I have somebody right now that's calling me and talking about like tingling in his arms and this and that. And I'm like, our conversation, collaborating with you, and like, I think it was like
B12
B12 deficiency,
Yeah, good,
right?
good. Yep.
So I'm sitting here and I'm like,
Yeah.
did they even ask that question?
Right.
Did they even, or did they, this is what happened is, and I don't want to say like this shouldn't happen, but there was ruling out of MS, there was ruling out of all of these other things that it's like, this woman went through all these, diet changes and weight loss, and I'm just sitting here thinking like,
ooh, yeah,
good Lord, like,
Well,
and
it's
like
like when
after
someone
talking to you, I'm like,
well,
did
there's this
anybody even
big
talk
push
to you about, are
for,
you eating enough? Like,
yeah, right. Or the right things, or there's this big plant-based movement, right? And if
let's talk about that.
plant-based can be really great, for heart health and cancer prevention, and it can also be extremely dangerous because if you're not filling in the missing pieces, specifically B12, iron, calcium, if you're just avoiding things that you don't want to consume or aren't consuming for whatever reason, and not replacing that with something else, like B12 deficiency B12 is obtained from animal products and a couple other things like seaweed and nutritional yeast. Like that's it. It's not something you're going to get inherently unless you're working for it.
Yeah.
Someone goes vegan and they think they're doing this wonderful thing, and then all of a sudden their hair's falling out, their lips have craters, their arms and legs are numb. And if that goes on long enough, you're not going back to where you were. Like it's permanent nerve damage. So when people just, and I've talked to, I don't know if this is, and I'm not bashing plant-based. I'm just kind of saying people need to make sure that they're doing it in a way that's sufficient.
Yeah, I think it's, we don't have to go off. I think it's people just trying to look like they're a good human, and there might be some ethical reasons to do it.
So many reasons.
Yeah. So, I mean, eating, you can maintain and be taking care of the planet by eating like things that are harvested correctly and great. And I'm sure you talk about 100% grass fed and 100% free range versus the, industrial farming products that are in cellophane products in the grocery store. Yeah. There's a debate there, I think, for optimal health, but there's also people who do it for, like, I will have people who come to me and I always want to know why they're doing it. Yeah. And sometimes it's to prevent, sometimes it's to lose weight. Sometimes it's the sign of an eating disorder. Sometimes, so there's so many different ways that it comes, so many different forms that it comes in, but it's just, is that one is that one of the bigger ones you're tackling, right? You tackle on a daily basis or recurring basis, or like what are the fads right now that are kind of out there on social media and that are being skewed, that present themselves to you every day, and you're like, okay, I've had enough, you bring down the gavel. You just want to get my blood going go right now, don't you? He's going to do it. That's what I was trying to do.
I have my list here, and this is probably going to hit 3 of them. So I won't even, Wait,
but bring them up after she said, I want to know.
I know, I'm not going to say it. I'm going to just check mark them as she goes on, and I'm going to sit back.
All right, ready? So keto, let's talk about keto. Like, oh my God, just no, like fiber. Remember that? Like the cancer preventing, cardiovascular preventing nutrient that's completely eliminated with that. Like, and, the amount of protein and fat that diet promotes, specifically protein, people think, oh, it's a good thing, I can't have too much of it. You absolutely can have too much of it because you can digest and absorb about 30 to 40 grams at a time. Once you go beyond that, now you've got to convert it to fat to store it. You've got to get rid of the nitrogen, which is now you're getting dehydrated. Yeah, you're losing weight. It's a lot of fluid. You're also now losing the sodium that you need for optimal performance. You're losing the calcium that your bones need, your muscles need for contraction. Just, and it's just, what sense does it make to say, let's eat bacon because it's healthier than a carrot? That's just, come on. So that's one.
Okay. So keto,
yeah. So
now, does keto have its place?
In my opinion, no.
Interesting.
No.
Okay.
No.
Not even in like short waves leading up to certain. Okay.
Can you do it for the rest of your life? Should you do it for the rest of your life?
Yeah.
No. Okay. Yeah. Will you lose a little weight? It's mostly dehydration. I absolutely don't think it has any place. Nope.
Okay.
Carbohydrates should be 50% of our diet. Protein should be no more than 20%. Fat should be 30. And that's minimum. That's if you're not an athlete. Now you're an athlete, the carbohydrate number goes higher. I don't care what type of athlete. Endurance athlete, like I'm a runner, I'm a marathon runner, that number goes up to 65%. My diet should be from carbohydrates.
Can you, and this is probably one, can you define carbs for people then, right? Because I'm sure people are confused.
Right. It's
about
not just, so bread, obviously bread, potatoes, all potatoes are fine. They don't have to be sweet potatoes, despite what everyone thinks. Fruit, a lot of fruits have carbohydrates in them. Beans, lentils, and there's some starchy vegetables. Vegetables have some, but some have more than others, like corn and things like that. So, and those are the sources that we get our fiber from. Sure, some of them are considered better sources than others, but I'm of the school of thought that all foods fit. We don't have to only do sweet potatoes. We don't have to only do brown rice. There's a room for all of them. Sure, we should try to do, higher fiber versions more often, but
the anti-bread and gluten-free thing went nuts because many people do have the allergy, right? And maybe are sensitive to it, but you find
not as many as they think.
Yeah, probably not. But then you find a bunch of people are like, oh, well, I don't want to develop that. And so it's like people like me would say, oh yeah, I'm gluten-free. And I'm like, are you sensitive? Like, it's got benefits, right? So that probably just is encapsulated in that whole talk.
Absolutely. So gluten, I don't know when gluten became this bad guy, but gluten's not that bad. Gluten's just part of bread. It's just part of the grain. So a lot of allergies, a lot of intolerances that we actually have now are a result of our diet being higher in omega-6 polyunsaturated fatty acids versus omega-3. So omega-6 are pro-inflammatory. Omega-3 are anti-inflammatory. As a general rule in this country, our diet is very high in the pro-inflammatory. Any oil that starts with S, safflower, sunflower, peanut, those are high in omega-6. Olive oil, avocado oil, flax, all those are higher in omega-3. Fish oil, good. All right, so when our diet is pro-inflammatory, which it is, plus vitamin D deficiency is very prevalent, which is a whole nother topic, but basically sum it up, we're inflamed, right? So when we're inflamed, our GI tract is now not this intact straw, it's now got holes, it's porous. And so those allergens, potential allergens that go into our system, they don't stay there like they're supposed to, they translocate out and our immune system's like, why are you here? You're not supposed to be here. And then therefore allergies develop. So really the key is not taking all these things out of our diet, it's decreasing inflammation. So the problem with a lot of people following a gluten-free diet, one of the problems is our grains are all fortified with nutrients of concern, like iron, riboflavin, niacin, folic acid. Gluten-free foods are not FDA regulated, so they're not fortified. So these people are thinking, oh, I'm getting all of these nutrients. They're not. And iron, like I said, is a really big concern. So now you've just eliminated a huge source in your diet of iron.
They're almost empty calories, right? They're just kind of nothing.
I mean, they're a lot primarily made out of white rice, right? Or corn. So, and then another issue is gluten holds bread together. So now you've removed that. Now you have to add something back in. And a lot of times what they add back in is an omega-6 fat. It's the safflower oil, it's the sunflower oil. So now you just took out something that wasn't really causing you a problem and added something that's contributing.
That was the most enlightening conversation that for me, who has a little bit above average nutrition knowledge, that omega-3, omega-6 inflammatory, because I can't tell you, I can't tell you, you can probably tell me way more, like how many people are walking around saying I'm inflamed. I feel inflamed.
Like 97% of us.
Everybody.
Right? Everyone. Yeah, absolutely.
And when you look at cancer breeding, when you look at how you feel when you look at
Right.
exhaustion. Like if you're fighting yourself all the time, if you look at all the autoimmune issues, like it's
Yeah.
like how
So
much
now-
is driven
now-
from inflammation and
Right. So
and
now you've
why.
got all these polyunsaturated fatty acids in your body, right? And that means that they have all of those double bonds. Those double bonds want to attach to something. So what happens in our body is they cause problems. And now people are like, oh, okay. And now I can't eat fruits and vegetables because they're too high in carbs. Well, the fruits and vegetables have the antioxidants that are going to stabilize all of those double bonds. So now you're just removed all that, and it's just the problem just
Yeah.
is worse
Yeah.
and worse.
So that's
Oh,
so that's
man.
kind of, and that's tied to a lot why you see people come in and do the keto, right? Like this is why I went keto, because I've heard all this stuff about
Yeah,
bread
right.
and carbs.
And it's desperation. Like I've been trying to
And
lose
I've
weight
tried
all these
everything.
years. What? Right. You've tried
By the
everything.
way,
None of it
I've
works.
tried
Why
everything.
is this one going
Right.
to work? It's not.
Right.
It's not. You're going to,
Yeah. And then, so then talk about just bread in general. Like, has that
amazing.
gotten,
Just
I was like,
I'm Italian. No.
yeah, but has it gotten, because of the whole gluten-free and keto and paleo movement, has bread gotten a bad rap? Does it have,
Totally.
and it has its
There are
place?
different qualities of bread, you know, I mean, the whole
Right.
conversation.
Like,
about
yeah, obviously
sprouted
I want
grain.
people to have, whole wheat, you know, if it says, if the first ingredient is enriched whole grain, it's really white flour with some caramel coloring added to look like it's whole wheat. So oat bread is great. Like I'm a dietitian. I'm not, you know what, like I've got 6 kinds of bread in my freezer. Like bread is not the devil, you know, but yes, whole grain oats, like higher fiber versions are obviously
now the
better,
old,
but I also don't like to say foods are good and bad. But
yeah, now,
bad.
but the old school, I agree. The whole, is this good or bad, is a terrible framing.
As soon as you say this food is bad, I can't have it, that's all you want.
No,
right?
it's a terrible framing in exercise, in physical therapy, in healthcare, and diet. So I totally agree.
Can you go on that? Like, I think this goes well to another one. I'm going to lead you to one of your points is that, you know, listening to your body to eat versus like meal planning. And, you know, so like the meal planning, the macro tracking, like all of this stuff that, you know, society is telling us to do to be well with eating. I think when I talked to you the second time, like just kind of got flipped on its head a little bit. You know, to the point of like, yep, this is why I really have wanted to connect with you, because all this shit and nobody can stick to it and nobody does it. And it's annoying.
Because people have gotten so wrapped up in what they should be having all the time. Like, how much of this should I have? What do I need? What does your body tell you? And I talk to so many people who come to me and they're like, what should I eat? When should, you know, what nutrients and all of this? Yes, there's guidelines, right?
Yeah, they just want the answer, right?
Yeah, but your body's really good at telling you what it needs if you can listen to it. And we've gotten so far away from being able to listen to our body, you know, that it makes it very hard for people, because it's, you know, let's count your macros, like you said, and have this many grams of this and this many grams of that. Macro counting in general, that's not a horrible thing, but when someone says I'm doing macros, it means they're doing the specific macro diet that's out there, which is generally speaking way too low in carbs, way too high in protein.
Yeah.
So I really try to encourage people, and I work a lot. It's not easy to sew back your brain into your body and like listen to your hunger cues and listen to the signals that your body is telling you. Like, you know, when I'm doing a long run, like all I can think about is the burger that I want to eat later. And it's my body telling me, oh my God, like you're using up so much iron right now. Like I literally, because I am in tune with it, I know what my body needs, but people have gotten away from being able to do that. So I really work with people on trying to tap into those cravings and not just brush them off as, you know, people will tell me, oh, I binge on sugar. I'm addicted to sugar. No, you probably ate no carbs all day, and now your body is telling you that it needs more carbs, and so it has to get them as quickly as possible. And so that's the easiest way to get them in. So look at your breakfast and add some toast, oatmeal, and look at your lunch. And if you're having a salad with tuna on it, like where's the fruit? Where's the, you know, where's the beans? Where's the carbohydrates that are going to prevent that feeling later?
I think that's an interesting thing, because people, and this is very parallel to movement. Like people get so hyper focused on where's my shoulders and where's my back and should I heart cheer and should I do this and what should I squeeze? I'm like, it's not how we're fucking made to move. Just fucking go walk. Go walk.
Yeah.
You can do your
Yeah.
exercises, come back. You know, if we set the exercise right, you're going to work the right things. And I hear that parallel from the nutrition side. And again, that was a very enlightening point to me, because I think societally we are driven to say, oh, we're such sugar addicts and we're addicted to sugar. I think one you used is, I've ruined my metabolism over the years.
Yeah.
And like, how do those addictions?
We're addicted to sugar because we've been telling you carbs are bad, when you actually need half of your diet to be from carbs, and they're labeled as bad. So now that's all we want. And you restrict this thing that you really need a lot of.
Yeah.
So your body's like, screw you, give me the carbs now in the quickest way that I can get them into my body, because I need them for energy.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So, and so that's a good parallel to drive on. Because like, for instance, like Allison's taught me all this stuff, like, you know, just doing push-ups or planks, like my hips were always sagging, and I just like, I didn't know it. I couldn't feel it. She constantly come over, no, up here, you know, like this. Finally, she put like a little round ball on my back and said, keep the ball there. And it turned into a game. And I wasn't thinking about where my hips were. I was trying to keep the ball on my back. And by doing that, inherently, my hips got where they were supposed to do. And then so she gave me so she didn't give me physical cues. She said, here's the game you're playing. This is how you win. And that one was keep the ball in the back. And other times it's, you know, when she elevates my heels when I squat, all of a sudden I can squat all the way down, but I'm not thinking about my hips and how tight they are.
Right.
So,
and it's like when I add carbs to people's diet early on, they have this fear, oh my God, I'm going to gain weight. You're going to gain weight from eating whole wheat bread at breakfast and a sweet potato at lunch when you've been eating 6 cookies in the afternoon, and you're going to do that instead. Like, how is that? You're not going to, and then inherently, like you just said, all of a sudden they're like, oh gosh, I don't have those sugar cravings anymore. That's weird, you know?
Yeah. So I was going to say, how do you get, because being in tune with your body, what your body's telling you nutritionally is way different than movement. Like I can feel when I do these squats that Allison does with my heels raised, it's just a simple example. I totally feel the difference in what it's supposed to feel like. And I feel different, the right muscles working. I don't know, like people just don't, it's the same thing with sleep. Like, you don't know that you've been missing out on sleep until you actually get a solid 8 for like a month straight. And then you're like, oh yeah, this is how you're supposed to be.
No,
I don't even know. And, right. No, I think I feel like I have a pretty sound diet and pretty healthy. I always feel great. I'm never sluggish, but I don't know when I'm feeling like something or that I need something, you know what I mean? Like maybe I just kind of have it intuitively, but I'm not conscious of it. And I feel that's would be very common with anyone, like especially somebody who's trying to overhaul a bunch of bad habits. Like, how do you gamify that the way Allison does with my heels or the ball in the back? How do you get people in tune with what they are craving? What are the cues that like you can bring to the forefront of their mind to say, all right, this is what I need or what I'm lacking?
One of the things I do, there's a few things, and it takes time. Like it's not, again, just like we said, you got to be patient. It's not going to happen overnight. You didn't,
right.
Shut off that ability overnight. So one of the things I'll have people do is kind of an exercise where I'm like, okay, you're going, it's lunch, let's say it's lunchtime or dinner time. Like instead of like, turn off the should, don't think about what you should or shouldn't have.
Yep.
If you could have anything right now, what would it be? Don't worry about what's in your fridge. Don't worry about what your dietitian said to have. Don't worry about what your physical therapist said you should or shouldn't have. None of it.
Yep.
What if you could have anything, what would it be? So imagine what that would be. Okay, now go to your refrigerator and see how you can come closest to that. So that's like one thing that I'll have them do.
Okay.
I also
and I'm sorry, what does that do for them? Like if I feel like I want ice cream, they could say, right? They could say something bad there.
Sure. All right. So maybe there's no ice cream.
Yeah.
Right. So, okay, maybe it is ice cream. Okay. So if it is ice cream, what does that tell you? Like maybe your body needs calcium. Maybe a yogurt smoothie would work. Maybe a grilled cheese. Like what do you have that's, going to work? Fulfill that, like what what does it tell you about what you need? You know, like I know on those runs that my iron is falling. You know, I'm doing a 20-mile run. My body's like, okay, like we got to replace this.
Okay.
You also utilize a lot of journaling. So when people get cravings, they journal about it. So when we come back to meet together, we can kind of talk about it, dissect it a little bit. If they binge, I talk about how it made them feel, what led up to it, so that we can sort of like, you know, maybe there's a trigger or something that caused them to do that. And then we kind of dissect, well, did that binge make you feel better or did it make you feel worse? So then we try to figure out how to navigate that so that whatever your reaction to that trigger or that stressor was, you can find something that's going to actually make you feel better instead of worse. Because now you were stressed, so you binge, and now you're more stressed because you've been, it just makes it worse, right?
Yep.
I also utilize yoga therapy, because yoga is like, throughout yoga, I'm always like, okay, and I do it via Zoom. And I started doing it via Zoom because it was a pandemic. Now I realized that there's no one else in the room that they can compare themselves. They can see me, but not like exactly, right?
Yeah.
And I can see them, but it's little. So I don't care what your pose looks like. I don't want you to care what your pose looks like. I want you to go into the pose the way your body's telling you to. And I keep reminding them, like, listen to your body. What's it telling you? And when we get on the yoga therapy session, I'm like, what do you need today? And I tailor it to exactly that. And then I try to remind them throughout to listen to the body. And then I remind them at the end, okay, you've listened to your body. Let's take this off your mat and use that skill when you're deciding what to eat. Are you hungry? Are you full? Kind of just allowing them to get in tune with that.
Yeah. That feels like that would be a tougher one, especially like, because it's the journaling, it's the habits, like you won't make the connection right away.
Right.
You know, like it will.
That's why there's all these different things that have to be employed to get there.
Yeah. And the journaling is something I just think we're a lazy society. People like feel like forever that's work, but like, it's just something that translates across everything. Like
it gets up here and I'm like, just dump it out.
Just dump it out.
And they're like,
oh,
I get it. You know, it just makes so much more sense.
Yeah. It's like finances, like tracking your budget, tracking your monthly expenses.
Yeah,
like, and then you wonder why you're X figures in debt. It's like, you don't even know where you're spending your money. Like, so I think that
it helps to connect the dots. Yeah.
I think writing anything down, whether it's nutrition, life goal, whatever, it really helps make that mind body connection that it seems like you're so focused on. That's cool. All right. So the keto, the whole gluten thing, that's one. There was a couple others you said you were going to mention that I thought maybe it was on Allison's list, or Al, did we?
I have a couple others, but if there's anying you want to hit specifically.
Those are the ones that make my blood boil the most.
Yeah. Now, I mean, I am personally like, like a steak, like having, high fat guy, like, those are still encouraged by you, but like, I think I don't want to put
in moderation, like as long as they're balanced and
so you're not, it's not, I used to work in cardiac rehab and like the red meat whole thing was like, you should once a month. And if you have it more than that, you're at risk for heart disease. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think that's kind of been bucked to a certain
depends. Okay. It does depend. Like, if you're at high risk for cardiovascular disease, I would encourage you to limit it to that. If you're an athlete and you're losing tons of iron, like I eat it once a week. I used to never eat it. I used to, in my head, in my whatever thinking before I knew what I know now, it was taboo and I would never eat it. And now that I'm a runner and I run, maybe 40 to 50 miles a week, my body tells me that I need it. My body used to tell me that I need it, but I had shut that off.
Right.
I know I do now.
Yeah.
So if someone is not exercising as much and they do have high cholesterol and they are at risk, then once a month probably isn't a bad idea.
Yeah.
But I like to focus more than take this out, take this out, take this out. All right, what do we need to add to your diet? And inherently that's going to push those other things to the side a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, okay, let's not talk about what I don't want you to have. Let's talk about how I want you to have fish 3 times a week. I want you to have avocados as often as possible. I want you to have beans every day. I want you to have lots of vegetables. I want you to have nuts because they have the healthier fat. I want you to have all these things.
Yep.
And then, maybe there's not as much room for those other things. But as soon as I say don't don't have this or don't have that.
Yeah.
That's all
Yeah.
they're gonna want.
No doubt.
And there's no reason that you can't sometimes have those things.
Yeah, we
right?
talk. I mean, that's Allison talks about that. Our metabolic health expert that came on talked about that. He's like, stop restricting what you can't do movement wise. Stop restricting what you can't have. Just say, what can we do? What do you like?
Focus on the
And
positives.
and focus on that. And it completely, I'm sure you see it like instantaneously shifts people driving towards like.
Yeah, sometimes people look at me at the end of a call, like, one of the first few calls with me, and they're like,
that was different.
why you didn't tell me to stop? They're like, well, what about all these things that I do? I'm like, let's focus on adding these. Let's just.
I can imagine. So the sugar one is like heart to me because I love sugar, but I do like it. And then, the idea, even after we met and like flirting around with the thought of, or the knowledge that it's a craving for something, putting in a sprouted grain bagel in the morning with a high egg, it's something that doesn't even cross your mind. And for me personally, I mean, I took away the first time we met, I think it was 4 things, right? Hemp seeds, chia seeds, and nuts. So I have been close to having those 4 every day.
Nice. Yeah.
Hemp seeds is like the easiest thing ever. I like to sprinkle it on things.
Amazing. And now you've gotten calcium, iron, and omega-3.
Right. And so, I mean, we met 2 weeks ago, and I would say, cravings for those things is just not even there. So I'm going to say, like, how do you, what's the timeline? Because some is that, and some is habit of like grabbing certain things at certain times, having things around. But how do you, educate people on when they should feel? So for PT wise, I always tell people, like, I love to have what I call like a therapeutic allotment of their care. I like to say, if it's a chronic issue, you know what, you are going to see improvements in function, but your pain's probably going to stay the same for 6 weeks. At 6 weeks, you're going to, but all of this change in function is progress. And then at this point, you're going to start to see pain go down, and you're going to start to continue to see your function go up. And so it doesn't give them like a hard and fast, like, you're going to feel better tomorrow. Here, I'm going to fix you and you're going to be great. It's more like an allotment of, this is going to take time. This is going to take thought. What is the guidelines for that when people do have cravings caused by deficiencies? It's like, if you change them, how long does it take?
I think it varies a lot depending on the nutrient. Some are restored a lot quicker than others, and it also depends on why they have the deficiency. If it's malabsorption, we're still trying to uncover why they're not absorbing it, or like, I don't know that I could give a hard and fast rule, but let's say someone says their metabolism is ruined from yo-yo dieting, right? And now let's say they're doing intermittent fasting. That's one I didn't mention. Like, going long periods of time without eating tells your body, okay, well, I can't trust you. I don't know when you're going to feed me. So I've got to hold on to the calories that you give me. And that can take a couple, 2 to 3 weeks. Usually when I have people start doing breakfast, snack, lunch, snack, dinner, all of a sudden they're like, I'm actually hungry for those snacks. Well, that's because you've told your body, okay, it's okay. I got this. But it also depends on how consistent they are. Like, if they do it some days and then they get scared again and they go back, then it's not going to happen as quickly because it's not consistent.
I wonder, intermittent fasting, I'm sure that one must drive you nuts because everyone comes to it. But do people not also have a good understanding of how that one actually should work? Like, if somebody's really doing it, let's say, quote unquote, and again, good, bad, right, wrong, right, where they're consistent, and it's a 16-9 or 15-9, 16-8 program, but they're eating well, they're eating in that window. I think for a lot of,
so that window again, though, is you're hungry at 9, but you're outside your window. So now you're going back to, I shouldn't eat, and you're turning off your hunger signals and you're teaching, and now you're severing this mind body connection again.
Is there, and let me go with more of the layman's arguments, right? Because this is fun for me. So what about the point that people will make? They say the old they say, where but evolutionary wise, like, our ancestors, we had to hunt, we had to forage, we had to go and gather and see. Sometimes we had to fight those hunger pains, and that's part of our evolutionary.
And that's part of why we have metabolic syndrome now, is because we adapted, and our bodies over time have learned our metabolisms have slowed over time. And we
So-
want to undo that. We don't have starvation now. So why are we trying to force it? I mean, some people do, but.
Right. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Yes. Okay. So yeah. So that time restricted eating, even again, if somebody's sticking to it disciplinary wise and they're eating healthy and they seem to be getting results, you're saying there could be a longer, slow burn on the back end of things that are accruing metabolically that they won't see for a few years.
I think it might happen sooner than a few years.
Whatever.
Like, I mean, you're just teaching your metabolism to not trust you. You're teaching it to slow down.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, you want to burn the food. You want to metabolize the food that you consume instead of store it because it doesn't know when it's going to be fed again.
Yeah. And I think a bigger problem with that too is that just people will be like, oh, well, I can eat whatever I want in that window too. So you compound like so many different issues with that, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So again, is that, are you on an island with that, or more your peers aligned and like, hey, this is just something that I don't know how it's gotten so big in society and people are monetizing?
Yeah. I mean, as dietitians, this is what we promote. Like eat breakfast, have snacks in between. Snacks are not evil as long as they're balanced and, you know.
Good.
All right.
I'm not going through a day without eating 5 times minimum.
Yeah. But somebody's having 2 to 3 meals, larger meals, and just doesn't have the craving for the snacks, right? It could be customized where that does work for them.
I think ideally it's better for our bodies to eat more frequently. It's better for our metabolism.
And what mechanism does that trigger physiologically that is good for us? The old adage is it keeps our metabolism burning. I don't know if that's the case.
It is the case. Yeah. Like if you eat breakfast and dinner and they're huge and they sit there and your body knows, well, I don't eat lunch, so I got to hold on to this breakfast till dinner.
Yeah.
It's just, you're not fueling the fire, right? It's like,
I find too, from an athlete side, and this is a reason often for referral out, is that they're just not eating enough to their body.
I mean, I have athletes come to me, they're burning 3,000 calories a day and they're eating 1,300 and they want to know why they're not losing weight. Well, you're not fueling, right? It's like you're trying to drive a car with the gas on empty, Yeah.
So for example, I mean, I know this might be like asking somebody their weight if you ask a dietitian, but like how many calories as a marathon runner do you need in a day to support your body? And not lose weight?
Well, it depends on it depends on your height, your weight, body composition, the amount of miles you run. Like there's people who do marathons who run 20 miles a week to train. There's people who run marathons that train 70 to 90 miles a week. And then I do like 40 to 50. So that plays a large role, in that. So that's something that I will ask people, I have to ask them their height and weight. I have to ask them, how many miles do you run? Is there additional cross training that you do, so all of those things play a role. So
I'm just thinking like people I know who have, that were, let's say a 40-year-old guy who's running marathons, has run his whole life. I mean, I know one guy years ago, he was like, I was told I need to eat between 5,000 and 5,500 calories based on how much I run and what, this and that. And he's like, I need to eat all day. And I was like, yep.
Yeah.
Yes, you do.
I mean, I'm in meetings for work and my colleagues will say, weren't you eating in the last meeting? Yes.
Yeah, I was.
Yeah, I was.
I think, for that, I would say for most people, they would prefer to eat than not to eat. Like I'm tired,
Exactly.
In the intermittent fasting thing, I think, we've had like some discussion on that in the past, but it's just, I think if you ask people what they would want to do,
they want to eat.
Well,
and it's interesting. I'll shift people towards eating breakfast, right? And they're like, why don't you eat breakfast? Well, because then I'm hungry all day. What does that tell you? When you don't eat breakfast, you're not hungry. When you eat breakfast, you're hungry. What do you think that means? Maybe your metabolism is turned on, right?
Yeah.
Very cool. And then I think we're wrapping up, but could you, these are great for like killing this or, considering macro habits. Can you just can we wrap up talking more about some of the advanced stuff that me and Allison, we're trying to get there. We're starting with our curriculum at that macro basic level of the primal movements and starting to tailor stuff towards people that want to optimize their performance. So once you kind of come in and assess people, and these are for more of your advanced athletes to optimize performance, what are the small tweaks that you're seeing from, general population guy, we're overhauling them, we're debunking myths, we're listening to our body. What's that final 5 to 10% that seems like maybe minor changes, or maybe they're major, that's to get from here to here on a performance standpoint,
wise?
What are those tweaks you see in maybe various sports, maybe more of your dynamic sports like football, maybe more your endurance sports like boxing and basketball and running. Like, what are those small tweaks you see there that people that are super active that follow us and kind of exercise and work out, I'd love to just see my gains go here. And I think tweaking my diet, even though it's pretty sound, would be one of the ways I would want to test and see how my body responds.
Yeah. So something I'll work on with athletes who have, we've gotten everything else done, right? We've gotten the meal structure, we've gotten the amount of carbs you need to enhance your performance. Then I get down and we've made sure that all of the micronutrients, the calcium, the iron, the zinc, all of those nutrients are being consumed appropriately. Then I go to.
Do you do that through vitamins too, like supplements? Or
I try only if I have to.
Yeah.
Only if I have to, for either, someone's just so deficient that we need that kind of buffer to get them back where they need to be, or they have a lot of allergies and they can't consume the foods that are going to provide those nutrients, or maybe they, just can't take in enough. So I'll do that if I have to, but I really try to do it with food first.
Okay. So anyways,
with the exception of vitamin D. Vitamin D, you're not going to get enough of. And that's going to lead to more inflammation. So that is one exception.
Okay. So you get there.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, you get there through vitamins. I would just derail you for a minute, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, that's where all the beans and the seeds and the nuts, because they're just so dense. They're nutrient dense, right?
Right.
Then I work with people on ergogenic aids from their foods. So those are things that we get from certain foods that help our performance. So an example would be certain foods like spinach and beets and watermelon help our body to release what's called nitric oxide. And nitric oxide helps to deliver, when we have nitric oxide, it dilates the blood vessels. It helps delivery of oxygen and nutrients to your muscles during your exercise. So that's going to help to enhance performance. Then there's a category of foods that have citrulline. Those assist with the nitric oxide release. So then you want to take in those foods to help that. So there's just all these different categories of ergogenic aids that I work on athletes with. And of course, which ones to take in more of depends too on the sport. Like if it's an endurance sport versus a power sport and things like that. So that's when we get, and again, I do try to do that from food versus having them take supplements.
Right.
I hate beets. I hate watermelon. I can only eat so much spinach. So I do, leading up to a marathon, I will take beet, pills and things, but I do try. I have a beet in there. I have a marathon next weekend. I'm going to really try my hardest to cut that up and roast it, but
and then right. And then in more of those fast twitch things, like your power lifters and maybe like your football players or sprinters, is that?
Yeah. So then we're looking at things like leucine, beta alanine. So we're doing poultry, eggs, broccoli, nuts, peanuts, things like that to help enhance those.
Yeah. And is it usually those are added as snacks or are you just increasing total calories with those or
timing?
We weave them into the foods that they're doing. Really ramping up before big competitions. But the newer research does say to try to incorporate them as often as possible.
Yeah.
But also like, week leading up to a really big thing, you're going to try to do as many of those as possible. So I have all these recipes that'll provide them that have as many of those as possible, different stir fries, shakes, things like that.
Yeah. And then there's two aspects to timing. Do you worry about timing at all? Or is that just kind of more hearsay where,
Yeah.
well, I think there's kind of two timings, right? It's like how much leading up to an event, right? That's
Right.
a period of time where you want to do
Yeah.
something. And then also throughout the day. Are those two
Right,
different
right.
things?
So we talked about, eating frequently throughout the day, leading up to, let's say, a marathon. A lot of times people will think, oh, I got a carb load and have pasta the night before. Carb loading for a marathon should actually start 7 days in advance. And so I'll figure out, how many grams they need compared to their weight and how fast they're going to run and all of that. So it's a range of 7 to 10 grams per kilogram per day. It's a ton of carbs. Like it's like 500 grams. And people look at me like I'm insane. I'm like, well, you want to bulk? Go ahead and bulk. But if you want to feel awesome during that whole marathon, this is the amount that you can ideally take in. I'll have them do all those ergogenic foods. I give them a list. I'll give them recipes. I also have people do a caffeine fast that week. So, we become so, our tolerance to caffeine when we take it in every day is so muted. So I'll have them do a caffeine fast the week of a big event and then reintroduce it the day of to actually feel it. So it works so great. I find myself that morning talking so fast. I'm like, oh my God, it totally works.
And then flip it on its head. Those fast twitch guys, the football and sprinters leading up to like game day, are they? I know you're doing more of the walnuts and the protein and the eggs and poultry with them. Is there anything leading up to the game day where you even tweak that a little bit or you increase, or is
I would
that one
increase
kind
carbs,
of
not to the degree because it's not an endurance sport as much. There's breaks, but they still do need the reserves. So it would be a shorter period of time and not quite as high.
Fun. Yeah.
Awesome.
All right. I'm tapped out. I got a lot to think about.
You have to go eat a snack, right?
I'm definitely going to do that. And you just touched on caffeine. I would love to wrap up on that because I'm a coffee in the morning guy. I just want a day. Are you anti-coffee? Are you anti-caffeine? No. Okay. Yeah.
No. So moderation, right?
Yeah,
one coffee is actually helps our liver. I use coffee as a vehicle to get in some anti-inflammatories to start the day. So I sprinkle turmeric, cinnamon, and ginger right in my coffee grounds. It's so good. And then you start the day with some anti-inflammatories. What some people need to keep in mind with caffeine, though, it does inhibit the absorption of certain nutrients like calcium and iron. So if that's an issue, then the timing, going back to timing, should be like, maybe if you have coffee with breakfast, maybe don't have that be your calcium iron rich meal. So unless you get plenty of those nutrients and that's not a nutrient concern for you, then don't worry about it. But so sometimes maybe needing to separate it from your meals.
I think it's a good closing note, just in case people are listening to this in the morning, got their coffee going. They're like, okay, like tonight I'll do my protein rich versus like right now. So
iron rich, calcium rich.
Iron rich. Calcium. Very cool. Ella, I'm good. I said I got a lot to ponder here. I'm going to listen to this one probably 4 or 5 times.
Awesome.
Which is always the benefit of when you have it. Like you get to listen to it before you even let it go. Back.
Yeah. No, we hit the majority of them. I think the vitamin D deficiency, that came up. I think what drove home vitamin D deficiency for me for when we met before was talking about a study where people were outside in the Northeast naked for days, like the whole winter. And they still were vitamin D deficient.
Yeah. Anyone above Boston, basically 40 degrees latitude from October to March, you're not getting it from the sun. And the foods that have it, fortified milk, fortified eggs, fortified yogurt, and shiitake mushrooms really are your significant sources. You get a little from fish and meat, but not enough to correct the deficiency, first of all, that we already have. And certainly not enough to give you what you need per day. So
very cool.
Exceptions to the rule.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah. So that was a big take home for me on there. Other than that, no, I really, really love this conversation. And again, like kind of to the point, like of what we're doing this podcast for, and from the movement side for me, it's like these foundational things aren't really new.
Right.
And
Right.
they're not super sexy. They're not super
Yeah.
fun at first. They're
It
not
does-
super, you know, like
it doesn't have a
it's like,
fancy name.
hey, eat a cucumber.
Right.
You know, like it's not really
Right.
exciting, right?
Yeah.
And-
Fiber. Yeah.
Yeah.
right. So I think just I mean, you know, your passion for it is just so evident, and you know, the science behind it always, you know, I always appreciate just you know, reading a current book that talks about how far away from like actual true science we've gotten behind things. And like the illiteracy on the majority of us from a science side is just refreshing to kind of hear your passion, and you kind of bring that back to the forefront on the roots of what we're made of, you know, from our nutrition side. No, it's great. I've really am enjoying collaborating with you from this side and with clients. It's exciting stuff.
Yeah.
So Matt, any closing remarks, my friend?
No, that was it. We really appreciate having you, and we'll, you know, anything you want to share with our listeners, we'll put in the links of our podcast and our YouTube. So where they can find you on social, where your website is, everything, we'll promote that for you. And we'll hit you up when we release
and your book,
this.
She's got a book coming out.
What's
So
the book?
Yes, my book should be out in the spring. Just how and why, a memoir of how and why I found nutrition. And a lot about how to reconnect, you know, how the reason I can guide people on this journey is because I've been there. So I was a gymnast, enough said. And it's just kind of goes back to how I learned to listen to my body and how I corrected, you know, mistakes that were made and things that were said. And it's called 32 Strands, and it will be out hopefully May or June. So
going to be ebook or going to be hard?
It'll be a
paperback?
book. I like paper.
Yeah, me too. I'm a voracious
old-fashioned.
reader.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So that would be like on Amazon and through your website and all
absolutely.
that good stuff.
Yeah.
Very cool. How was the writing process? Like, how long did it take?
You know, a couple years.
Yeah.
I talked about it for about 10 years first. And then I was like, all right, stop talking about it. Just freaking do it.
Yeah.
The pandemic helped, you know, sitting in my house by myself. I'm like, all right, I guess we'll just work on the book.
We started a podcast that way.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, there's times where it's hard to write a memoir because it triggers things but it's cathartic. And if I could recover on this journey, I want to lead others to it. So it's an important thing. So I really
I just started like writing opinion articles for a blog website. And so I'm just interested every time somebody like you put out a book, like that's way, like some people are like just a page a day. Some people go on these.
And there's days where there's just like, I can't do it. And there's days where I can't stop doing it.
It's such an interesting, like torturous kind of thing, like love-hate thing. You know, because you don't realize how much energy goes into like really thinking and structuring it so other people really understand the way you're feeling it and capturing it. Yeah, it's a tricky thing. So mad respect. The book.
It's been a journey for sure. So I'm super excited. And it was kind of, my editor actually, this was kind of exciting when I talked to her last time. She's like, this is actually 2 books. So there'll be a cookbook that comes out of it as well as the memoir. So she's going to divide it. So
and that's probably like you didn't even plan that, right? It just kind of happened.
I just thought I'm going to publish a book, and now I'm publishing 2. So
very cool. All right, this I think our second author that we had on.
Oh, cool.
Dr. Phil Avadia just released his book this past month. So
Fred writes. Fred Duncan.
And Fred. Gee, we got a ton of authors.
Cool. Yeah.
Nice. Allison's next.
Yeah, I know. I'm in the talking about it all the time process. So,
it's the first step. I think
I have like 3 different documents of 3 different things I want to write, you know, like from a
I'm already in my head, like, what's the next one going to be about?
Yeah.
That's great.
Awesome. Just do it.
Do it.
It'll be fun.
All right. Teresa, thanks for joining us. This has been awesome.
Thanks so much for having me, guys.
We'll probably stew on it and probably invite you back as we keep growing, because we go and maybe we go deep in the weeds, and people can always reference this as part 1 of the macro, and then I don't know, maybe
use macros. Get out of there. Just
macro look.
I know.
All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Like and subscribe down below. Follow Theresa. Look in the in the comments for that, and be on our lookout for her book coming out in the spring of 2022. We'll help hype it, so don't be a stranger.
Sweet, yeah.
There's the Dr. Allison Sinikowski, Dr. DeLorenzo. I'm just a guy. We're signing off on the body movement. Thanks, everyone.